Welcome to Kuma English Listening Hub. In this episode, we are delving into a world that is at once faintly absurd and quietly revolutionary. The rise of niche sports commentary. Not football, not tennis, not cricket on a sleepy Sunday afternoon, but the astonishing growth of highly specialized commentators narrating everything from competitive tag to marble racing. If that sounds rather far-fetched, bear with me. By the end of this program, you may find yourself quite tempted to tune in to someone breathlessly describing a world championship in, say, extreme ironing, or a high-stakes match of drone racing unfolding in a disused warehouse somewhere in the Midlands. Let's begin with a simple question. Why on earth would anyone watch a sport they had never heard of, explained by a commentator who, in all likelihood, invented half the terminology on the spot? The obvious answer would be curiosity, but that barely scratches the surface. The less obvious answer is that commentary, when done brilliantly, turns confusion into fascination. It creates a narrative where there was previously only noise. Consider for a moment the quintessential image of British sports commentary. A slightly overexcited voice wafting from the radio in a corner shop, or a calm, measured tone drifting from the television as rain delays play at Wimbledon yet again. That voice doesn't merely tell you what is happening, it helps you feel that you belong to a shared cultural moment. You are not just watching, you are, as the British might say, in on it. Now, transplant that tradition into an age of live streaming, cheap microphones, and global audiences who are frankly spoiled for choice. You no longer need a broadcasting van, a satellite truck, and a contract with a major network. You need a half-decent internet connection, a reasonably clear voice, and a game that is even vaguely watchable. From there, if you can weave a story, you might just have a niche audience on your hands. Take, for instance, competitive tag, often called chase tag. The basic premise is painfully simple. Two people run around an obstacle course. One chases, the other dodges. It is the sort of thing that many British children would have played in school playgrounds, minus the sponsorship deals and the slow-motion replays. Yet, with a charismatic commentator providing color, the whole thing is transformed into something that feels high-stakes, strategic, almost gladiatorial. A good commentator might say, with spiraling urgency, that a particular athlete has a reputation for outrageous last-second escapes, or that a certain corner of the course has become an absolute nightmare for those who underestimate it. None of this is strictly necessary for understanding the chase. You could watch in silence and still follow who is catching whom. But the commentary dramatizes the event, lending it the sort of structure normally reserved for a gripping thriller. This, I would argue, is the secret at the heart of niche sports commentary. It is, above all, about storytelling. The rules, the statistics, the history, even the technical jargon are tools in service of that story. They provide hooks on which the commentator can hang a narrative arc. Underdog against favorite, veteran versus newcomer, flair opposed by discipline, chaos battling order. In Britain, there is a long tradition of turning the apparently trivial into the sublimely important through skillful narration. Think of those slightly tongue-in-cheek commentaries on the annual Oxford and Cambridge boat race, where the river, the weather, and even the angle of the cox's head are described with almost reverent detail. Or the way Test Match Special on the radio will quite happily spend 10 minutes discussing a cake brought in by a listener, without for a moment losing its grip on the cricket itself. Niche sports commentary borrows that same sensibility and drags it into the digital age. A well-spoken voice, with an ear for rhythm and a flair for dry humor, can make even the most obscure contest feel oddly momentous. 1 minute, you are watching marbles roll down a homemade track. The next, you are emotionally invested in whether the green team, cruelly denied victory last season by a freak collision on the final bend, can claim redemption. Quite a few of these commentators are, in effect, one-person broadcasting corporations. They set up cameras, tweak the lighting, manage a chat window full of excitable fans, provide live analysis, edit highlight reels, and handle sponsorship deals, all from a spare bedroom or a corner of the living room. It is, to borrow a very British phrase, a proper shoestring operation, and yet, when it works, the results can look surprisingly professional. Of course, not every niche sport is entirely frivolous. Drone racing, for example, blends engineering, spatial awareness, and genuinely impressive reaction times. The commentators who specialize in this field must juggle several layers of explanation at once. They need to describe what is happening on the track, interpret the first-person camera views streaming from each drone, and occasionally unpack the technical issues that cause a craft to suddenly veer into a wall. In doing so, they become translators between two worlds. The world of the passionate insider, who knows precisely what a firmware flash or a video feed dropout entails, and the world of the vaguely intrigued newcomer, who only knows that their favorite pilot has just disappeared from the screen. Striking the right balance is no small feat. Too much jargon and you lose half your audience. Too little, and the real depth of the sport never quite comes across. This dance between accessibility and expertise is one of the reasons niche commentary offers such rich material for language learners. A skilled commentator will repeat key terms regularly, weaving them into complete sentences and varying the surrounding vocabulary. Over the course of a match, you begin to infer what those terms mean, long before anyone pauses to define them directly. For advanced learners, especially at a C2 level, there is another layer of interest. Niche commentators often speak at a natural, sometimes breakneck speed. They react in real time, abandon sentences halfway through, start again, and pepper their speech with idiomatic expressions. One moment you might hear, "He's absolutely knackered." You can see it in his footwork. And the next, "That was a spot-on decision from the referee." No complaints at all, fair enough. This unedited spontaneity can be challenging, but it is also a brilliant training ground. Let us not overlook the cultural aspect. Many of these sports, and the ways in which they are talked about, are deeply local. A lawnmower racing commentator from rural England will draw on a different set of cultural references than a drone racing host from inner-city Manchester. You might hear passing mentions of village fetes, bank holiday traffic, or the peculiar British ritual of queuing in the rain, all rattled off as if everybody in the world instinctively knows what they are. This is where your job, as an advanced listener, becomes almost anthropological. You are not merely listening for vocabulary or grammar. You are listening for clues about how people organize their social lives, what they consider funny, what they find impressive, what they dismiss as slightly silly. When a commentator chuckles and says, "Well, that's him properly done for. He'll be buying the first round after that mistake." Mate, there is an entire culture of post-match pub rituals hidden in that throwaway remark. The economics of niche commentary are no less intriguing. In the past, to make a living, you either joined a major broadcaster or resigned yourself to treating commentary as a hobby. Now there are hybrid models. Crowdfunding, sponsorships, membership platforms, merchandise linked to teams that exist almost entirely online. A commentator might set up a membership tier where fans get early access to replays, behind-the-scenes tactical breakdowns, or even live Q&A sessions. It is tempting to be a bit sniffy about all this, to dismiss it as just another example of the internet monetizing what used to be informal fun. Yet if you scratch the surface, you often find communities that are surprisingly supportive, even tender. Regular viewers learn each other's usernames. They worry if a familiar voice does not appear for a few weeks. They organize meetups at small venues that, up until then, had only ever hosted local darts nights and karaoke. I spoke to one such commentator, at least in spirit, you can imagine the type, who described the experience as like running a tiny, extremely opinionated radio station out of my kitchen. They would finish their day jobs, sort out dinner, and then, while the washing machine thudded away in the background, they would go live to an audience scattered across 5 continents. On the face of it, it sounds exhausting. Yet, according to them, it was energizing. When you see the same names popping up in chat, they said, and they're egging each other on, cracking daft jokes, it feels like you're all in the same room. It's daft, but it's kind of lovely. Naturally, there are pitfalls. Commentary is, by its nature, built on snap judgments. A player slips, a drone crashes, a marble veers inexplicably off course, and the commentator has to say something immediately. They may speculate, occasionally unfairly. They might misread a situation and only realize later, when they rewatch the footage, that they have been rather harsh. The best commentators are remarkably quick to correct themselves. They will come back on air and say, quite straightforwardly, "I was a bit out of order there. I didn't see the full angle." Fair enough. That was a brilliant piece of defending, actually. This willingness to climb down, to revise one's view publicly, is not only admirable, it is also something of a linguistic gift to the observant learner. You hear in real time how educated native speakers soften a previous stance, how they apologize without sounding overly dramatic, how they acknowledge nuance. Let us talk briefly about tone. In British commentary, there is often an undercurrent of self-deprecation. Even as the stakes are raised rhetorically, the commentator may undercut themselves with asides like, "Well, I say strategy. It's mostly organized chaos, isn't it?" Or, "I wouldn't fancy trying that myself. I'd be flat on my face in about 3 seconds." This habit of gently mocking oneself keeps the whole spectacle from becoming pompous. It signals to the audience that everyone knows this is serious, but not too serious. For C2-level listeners, tuning your ear to these tonal shifts is invaluable. The words may be straightforward, but the meaning resides in how they are delivered. A phrase such as, "That went well, didn't it?" can, depending on intonation, express sincere praise, mild sarcasm, or full-blown exasperation. Commentary, with its rapid-fire mix of description and reaction, offers an ideal laboratory for exploring these shades of meaning. So, how might you make practical use of niche sports commentary as a learning resource? One approach is shadowing. You listen to a short clip and attempt to repeat, in real time, what the commentator is saying, imitating not only the words, but also the rhythm and the intonation. You will almost certainly fall behind at first. You may, quite understandably, sound a bit ridiculous. That is entirely normal. Over time, though, you will notice that your own spoken English becomes more fluid, less halting, more capable of following your thoughts without constant hesitation. Another approach is analytical. Choose a 5-minute segment and transcribe it by hand. Then go back and highlight useful phrases. Notice how the commentator links ideas. Having said that, by the same token, to be fair to him, if we're being brutally honest, these connective tissues of speech are precisely what give fluent English its sense of ease. They are also, rather annoyingly, the bits that are rarely taught explicitly in textbooks. You might also keep an ear out for register shifts. When something dramatic happens, commentators often slip from relatively formal description into far more colloquial territory. "Oh, he's bottled it completely," or "Blimey, that was close." Understanding when and how to deploy these expressions marks a real leap towards native-like competence. You do not want to say "blimey" in a job interview, for instance, but in a lively conversation about a match, it can sound perfectly natural. Before we wrap up, let us zoom out once more and consider what the rise of niche sports commentary tells us about contemporary culture. On one level, it might suggest that we are increasingly willing to invest our time and attention in ever more specific interests. On another, more hopeful level, it reveals a hunger for shared experiences in a world that often feels rather fragmented. The fact that thousands of people will tune in to watch a homemade obstacle course, narrated by a voice they have never met in person, hints at a broader desire to feel part of something. The sport itself matters, of course, but so does the ritual. The familiar phrases, the in-jokes, the communal groan when a favorite competitor slips at the final hurdle. In that sense, niche sports commentary is not merely a quirky corner of the internet. It is a reminder that storytelling remains at the heart of how we connect. Whether the subject is a Grand Slam final or a championship in cheese rolling, what pulls us in is the human voice making sense of it all in real time, saying, effectively, "Come on, I'll have a look at this with me." Isn't it extraordinary? For you, as a C2 listener, The challenge and the opportunity lie in allowing that voice to become a training ground. Let the speed push your comprehension. Let the idioms unsettle you slightly, then look them up. Let the cultural references send you down rabbit holes of research into British habits, humor, and history. The next time you stumble across a commentator breathlessly explaining a sport you had no idea existed the day before, resist the urge to click away. Instead, stay for 10 minutes. Listen not only to what is being said, but to how, and to what that reveals about the language and the culture behind it. You may discover that, in following the flight of a tiny drone, the roll of a marble, or the dash of a competitor across a padded arena, you are, in fact, quietly honing your English to an impressively high level. And if after all that you find yourself narrating your own daily life in a commentator's voice, describing your morning commute as though it were a high-speed race, or treating a trip to the supermarket like a tactical mission, well, you would not be the first. Slightly eccentric, perhaps, but also rather good practice. That is all for today from Kuma English Listening Hub. Cheers for listening, and see you in the next episode.